Artistic recycling. In this video, we're going to look at a few ways we can creatively repurpose items that we would ordinarily throw away. First, we're going to practice making handmade paper from paper scraps that you might have around the house. In these photos, you see Laotian people making paper sheets with beautiful flowers and petals added as the paper is pulled. Let's have fun making some paper. The first thing you're going to do is collect paper, and I went ahead and you can find pieces in magazines, you can find leftover scraps of construction paper. I've got some gift wrap paper in here, but I segregated my colors, and I've got more of each color. I just put a few out for you to see. I've got orange, red, blue, green, yellow, purple. And you're going to see later why I'm segregating. I'm going to make pulp in different colors. So I will get all of the oranges torn up, and all of these, I'll keep them in separate bags, and I'll get them all torn up in small pieces. What we're going to start with, though, is to make paper out of anything that's just neutral, light colors. This is like leftover envelopes, junk mail, and I'm just tearing it into pieces. I'm looking at this one right here has a little bit of that plastic window that came in the junk mail, so I'm going to get rid of that. But take all your paper, collect it, tear it into little scraps. And this is a fun thing to do if you in the evening are sitting and watching TV. Just tear paper, and everybody in the family is going to wonder what you're doing, but they'll see that you'll have beautiful paper afterwards. One thing I did, and I'll show you some images of the paper I made, is I had some leftover business cards from a place I worked, and it was like I had just ordered them, 500, a box of them. So I no longer was doing that particular title, and I need to throw them out, and I thought, I can't bear to do this. These are nice cotton paper type cardstock business cards. So I tore them up into little pieces, and let me show you what I came up with. Here are some of the papers that I came up with using the business cards I was telling you about, and they had some green print on them, and so you can tell that it has kind of a greenish gray color to it. But I thought these were kind of neat. Depending on how much pulp you put into your water bath, it will dictate how thick the paper is. And you can see this is a nice foldable type paper. Whereas this, which I really love this one, but it's more like a cardboard. Very nice feel to it. So we'll get to that in just a little bit, but I wanted to show you the paper that I made from leftover business cards. So while you're collecting things, I'm going to get some of my papers and I'm going to tear them all up. Then I'll show you what we're going to use to make the paper, and we will proceed with having some fun with paper making. So besides the paper that's been torn up, here are some other things you're going to need to make the homemade paper. First of all, you need a mold and decal, and I'm referring to that as something that you can stretch either the organza fabric or window screen over, and then have something that matches it. So when you pull your paper sheets, you're going to go under the water, pull this up, kind of shake it to get all the fibers together, take that part off, then that will leave you with a piece of paper that has a rim around it. Okay, and you can make a mold and decal. This was one that I just bought online, and it wasn't very expensive. It came with the mold and decal and some other items in the kit. But you can also take, I found at a thrift store some old embroidery hoops. And I thought, well, this might be interesting because I'm tightening. It's got the two rings, the wooden rings that hold it in there. And then I found some organza fabric. I'm going to try paper with this because I think I want something that the water will drain out of, but it will hold the fibers on top to create the sheet. So this is one I'm going to try. The other one, the same embroidery hoop, but what I did was I found some of the window screen. This is not the metal kind. This is kind of a synthetic material. You can tell that's got a much bigger grain to it with the screen, but I think it'll hold the fibers in. So we're going to try pulling something like this. And the other option is if you have an old picture frame or stretcher bars, two the same size, and this is where you go thrifting or look in your garage or basement, whatever you might have. You can have both the same size that will fit on top of each other, and you can stretch the screen or the fabric over the opening, and that will give you your mold and decal, and you'll have the other piece of wood frame on top. So what you want to do, though, this is an awfully large one here. Unless I wanted to make paper that big, I would need to make sure that I had a vat that was big enough to accommodate this. Something like this mold and decal, 8.5 by 11, I don't need it too big. I don't need it quite as wide. Here's the tub or the vat that I have to hold the water. It's a plastic one that I just got at Walmart, about 8 inches deep. And then I have the blender. This is an old one. I don't use it for food. I keep it in the basement, and you can find something like that at a thrift store. Then don't forget your towels, some old towels, sponges, and maybe paper towels. This will help with the messiness of all the water. The other thing you're going to need is some kind of cushioning cloth. This came with the kit. This is a really, it's like blotter paper. I mean, it's totally like blotter paper. It's a thick kind of a cardboard cotton paper. These are stained. I have used these over and over and over again. They don't really tear that easily, and they kind of wrinkle, but once you dry them out, they're good to go again. Even though you can tell where I've done paper and it's kind of stained it, but that's okay. I can still use them. If you don't have blotter paper or something thick that will absorb the water, you can also use pieces of felt, cotton felt. If you have sheets of that, that's something that will absorb the water from the paper. So the first thing I'm going to do is to take my blender, and I'm going to add probably, I don't have exact measurements, but at least do half of the blender with water. This is just regular tap water. And then I've got, remember I was telling you about some of the paper, and we're going to do like a white pieces of paper. I'm going to just add, maybe a couple, 3 handfuls here. I'm going to push it down in the water. What I usually do is try to leave this paper in here just for a few minutes. I may have to add more water to this. Let it sit, because you want it to break down the fibers of the paper. So I kind of let it sit for just a few minutes, get it all in there, and then I'll show you how I mix it up. So I've started mixing this. I'm going to mix it some more because you can see there are still lumps in here. So you want to make sure that this does not have lumps in it, and I'm going to put it on puree, liquefy, whatever. You want it to be like a smoothie. I will do that and then come back and show you what the next steps are. What a lot of people do is also add liquid starch to their slurry and paper pulp. And the reason you do that is it's kind of like a hair conditioner. After you've washed your hair, if you want to smooth down the hair follicles, and if you want to smooth down the paper particles a little bit, you add maybe a teaspoon of liquid starch to this. I'm not going to add it because I just don't have any on hand. But that will help kind of smooth the fibers so that you can have a nicer, cleaner writing surface. And then sometimes even afterwards, when the paper's wet, people will spray a spray starch on top of the pages. And I may do that to help seal it a little bit, but it just helps with when you're wanting to write with inks and things like that. I'm going to continue blending this until it becomes more like a smoothie, and then I will come back and show you the next steps. And it looks like I've got the pulp pretty ready, so I'm going to pour some in here. See what happens. I'm going to pour it all in here. So when you get it in the water, you want to swish it around with your hand to where all those particles are just suspended in the water. Then I'm going to take my mold and decal. I'm going to put that on top. And I'm going to swish it some more. I'm going to go hold it tight. I'm going to go under the water. I'm going to pull straight up. If you look and you start seeing screen through this, you know it's too thin. You can kind of tell. Kind of shake it a little bit, get some of that water out. And I take the top off. Set that aside. Okay, here's my wet paper, and I've got my blotter paper right here. So I'm going to make sure you can see that. I'm going to lay the blotter paper. Or, remember when I said it could be felt? Do you see how that is just soaking up all the water? I'm going to put another on top of that. I'm just lightly pressing to soak up some of the water that is still there in the pulp that's hanging on the screen. Once I do that, I should be able to tip this over, and there's my piece of paper. Now that is got bubbles in it. That's still incredibly wet. I may just set that aside and let it dry. I could take and do another sheet on top. But what's happening is you're pressing out all of that water, and then the paper itself, the piece of paper itself, will not come apart. It shouldn't come apart. Okay, as this dries, let's set it aside here. Right now, I'm not going to try to take this off of the cushion cloth. I'm going to let it dry a bit, and then it should just. I'll come back later when it's more dry, and I'll show you how it just peels off. So, do you remember how I was talking about the two embroidery hoops that I took a window screen and I took leftover organza fabric and I wedged it in there to where it's kind of tight, and that can be my screen for paper. I'm going to swish this again with my hands, and every time you should add more pulp. There's still enough in here, I think, for these two. Well, let's try this one. Put it underneath, pick it straight up. I'm going to lay a cushion cloth on top, let it absorb. I'm going to come in and try this one. This is the window screen. That is pretty thin. I think I need more pulp in here, actually. If you don't like it, just put it back in there, swish it around. That might work. Right over here, and put another cloth on top of that, or paper on top, blotter paper on top of that. So if you do this and you're making multiple sheets, which if you get everything out, you want to do more than one sheet. I mean, it's too much of a mess to say, oh, that's all I'm going to do. Flip it over. And I do have a round piece of paper there. Do some more blotting from that side. I'm going to do the same thing to this one, and I'll have two round pieces of paper. Next, I'm going to mix up the colored pulp. So here is one tip for you. If you want to make your colored, if you want to do something with multicolors on your paper, make some pulp ahead of time. You can go ahead and put it in just containers that you might have around the house and refrigerate it if you want to. It doesn't last more than 3 days, so I would plan on make the pulp one day, get everything cleaned up, come back in and say, oh, now I want to pour some of the pulp into this vat and make an actual picture. You can use if you get it thin enough, you can use the turkey baster. I'm just going to take it with my fingers and make dots on here. And I'm making a pattern on my paper, but what I'll do is press into this with the cushion sheet so that those little dots will merge with the entire piece of paper, and all the fibers will merge together. I haven't got enough colors mixed right now to make a landscape or a surface design, but if I take the time to do that, that would be a fun thing to do. So I'll just do it with this one. Set all these aside. And another thing is, I just messed that one up, didn't I? Well, we'll let it go with that. I'll take the top off. This may not be a keeper after all, because I bumped it. But if I take the sheet, once again, I'm going to just really press. I'm pressing more with another piece of the cushion paper on top. And what I end up doing is flipping the whole piece over, and I pressed from the back side also. And that shows you how the paper is ready to dry in that form. And here you can tell I'm laying down an old towel on my table, and I'm going to flip it over, and on the back side, I'm going to press, and I can use that sponge I was talking about. I could use more cushion paper. I can use a part of a towel. Here I've got a part of a towel that I'm using, or a wash rag. I'm just trying to blot as much as I can from both sides. And by doing that, I'll be able to pick it up just like this and leave it on the cushion paper and let it dry overnight. So here you can tell I'm pulling another piece, and I'm speeding this up a bit so that you don't have to see everything in real time. But I pulled something, and I started a piece of paper on the round embroidery hoop, and then I started adding little pieces of the purple pulp, just little polka dots all over. I added that all over the top. Then I went ahead and pressed it with a cushion cloth, front and back. As you work with paper making, you're going to find your own method for how you press the moisture out, whether you're using towels or rags or sponges, but it's just fun to experiment with. So this is how the purple polka dot paper turned out. Once again, I was a little thin on the paper pulp, but it was still fun to do, to add other colors to the paper. Okay, so I pulled a leaf. I put a leaf in the paper. I need more water and pulp in here, so I'm not going to get a full sheet. But I wanted to show you kind of what it's like to embed something in the paper pulp. I'm kind of pushing it down, making sure some of the edges are covered by some of the paper pulp. When you do this, you just need to make sure that the leaf or whatever you're adding is flat and not really thick, because it's going to be hard unless you're doing have lots of pulp and you're doing a real thick piece of paper. Something else you can do is to take herbs, flower petals, all kinds of things, and kind of filter in there. When you're pulling the paper, the sheet of paper, you want to add it to and let it fall in there and merge with the paper fibers. So we'll kind of try this one, see how it comes out. Here's something similar that I did a few years ago. I took a leaf and I had some yellow pulp, and so I embedded that leaf in the yellow pulp, and then I ended up finding a picture frame at a thrift store and I framed it. And it's something that I've really enjoyed, so it's kind of similar to what I was wanting to show you. Here I am pulling some of the paper after it's dried off the cushion cloth. It looks kind of like flour tortillas or something, but I left these for pretty well overnight. I just left them on a rack and let them dry, and then I was able to pull them off real easily. And here is the leaf I embedded in the purple pulp. And I really was trying to get by with not using much pulp. That was a beautiful color purple. I should have added more so that it could embed the leaf better into the paper fibers. But I didn't, and at least it shows you how that turned out. I decided to pull the leaf off of the paper, and I thought, well, this is kind of cool. It leaves an impression. So if you have anything that has a texture to it and you press your paper with that, you're going to end up with embossing. That's just something that this happened by accident, but it's something you can keep in mind and do when you're making paper. So here are some of the final papers: rectangles, circles, and polka dots. Lots of fun. I've got, and I'm sure you do too, lots of envelopes that I get in my mail. And once again, I'm thinking, how do I save these? What do I do with them? Sometimes the inside with the patterns that are on the inside of the envelope can make great collage material. Sometimes I use it for that. But I'm going to show you something today of what you can do with the envelopes themselves. And that is, I made some books out of them. I did a hinge fold on these. I'm going to show you another way of doing this. I took all of those envelopes. Some of them have windows that you can see through to the other side. I made little books out of them. And I did stamping, I did drawing, I did a little painting, crayons, whatever you want to do. This is fun. It kind of it can make a fun gift too. You could take the envelopes, cut them in half, and make a little small one, a little small book, but I went ahead and just made the full length of the envelope. Here's another one. I took skewers that I had from kitchenware and made a hinge fold, and then I had some wire, and I did some things with a cover. But it's the same idea of manipulating the insides, binding them together, and creating a collection, some type of book. It could be anything you want. So I'm going to get my stuff together. I'm going to show you some supplies that you might want to gather to use this. First of all, gather some of these envelopes. Look around and see if you have any of these. Here's another book I made from the envelopes, and what I did was, on this one, was to make it horizontal format instead of the vertical. I did the stitching on the short side, but you can tell, I also did some stitching on edges. I went through and tried to make a theme, patterns, music, this center fold, I went ahead and made a gatefold. So all the different things you can do. This window, I took and put netting in it, taped that in there. Then I moved on, I put words, everything, and then I had a window in the back. I had an envelope that had a circular window, and I had a neat little piece of lace. It was kind of a fabric type lace, and I went ahead and put that in there as part of the window. So all kinds of possibilities. I wanted to show you this one as well. The first thing I'm going to do is, for me, I think I'm going to cut off the flaps. I probably don't want that in my book. You may decide that you do, but I'm going to cut off the flaps. In one of these books, I actually made the edge. I cut in with this part here. And I want this to open, so I'm just going to either slit it or I can just trim it off, the very top off, top and bottom. So I'm going to do that so that I've got this type of thing. And then as you come in here, you may look and say, well, I want to glue that down. I'm going to tear that off. So get your envelopes and go through and start prepping. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm prepping each piece. I'm going to encourage you to look around the house and see what you can find to decorate the pages. I went ahead and I got my pages cut, trimmed out to where they all open. I may not keep them this size. I may trim them down to one side, maybe curve the edges. I may change the shape, in other words. But what I'm wanting to do, first of all, before I assemble it into a book, is to do some decorating on these pages and then decide how I'm going to assemble them. So you've got the front part blank and you got the inside that's pattern. Here's some things that I found around the house. Any kind of kids markers, crayons. You could have colored pencils if you wanted to use that. I went through and I found stamps. I had some stamp pads, and this is just regular office stamp pads. And here are some stamps I had. This one was carved from a long time ago from a piece of linoleum. You can carve it from an eraser, a white flat eraser. I had this that was imprinted into some foam. I think it was some kind of swimming deal. I got at the dollar store and I cut it into pieces, and you can press with heat. You can press that texture in there. This is something carved from foam. Here's something that it came from a pad that I found at the hardware store, and it was some kind of kitchen pad. I cut it up into pieces. I glued it to a little piece of eraser, and it can be a stamp. Okay, those are things you can use. You can look at, I found some, as long as it's not real thick paper, I found some thin old pattern pieces. I know I can glue those down, and they are kind of translucent. You could take wrapping paper, gift wrapping paper, any scraps that you have. And then, after you've got a lot of things around, some things assembled to decorate the pages, I want you to find thread. And this can be basic sewing thread, but if you look at this, I found an upholstery thread that seems to be a little thicker. You can find heavy duty. This is something that is all-purpose dual duty thread. That will work, but you may want to do a double up your thread. The other thing, if you've got a thin thread, you can also take a candle and you can, like beeswax or a candle, and you can just wax the thread, and that'll help strengthen it and smooth the fibers so it glides easier through the paper. Okay, and then I just found sewing needle. So any kind of needle. This has a little thicker eye to it. And I've got my heavier thread, and I'm going to show you how we're going to stitch these together after we've decorated the inside. So let's do a little decorating first. So here I'm going to take that Remember I was telling you about the little piece of pad, something at the hardware store that I got, and how I glued it to this as a stamp. I also had this piece left over. And I'm going to do some texture rubbings. I'm going to take just crayons, and I'm going to see about texture rubbings with that under it. And you know, with this, if you haven't already cut the pages, it won't matter if you go to the edge or not, if you're going to cut the pages down. So go ahead and just put lots of stuff on here. This window, that's going to be part of where this lines up, and you may be seeing something through that. It may be a word, it may be a phrase or a verse or a poem that you want the viewer to see through that window. So that how you line these pages up is going to matter in just a little bit. So I'm doing something like that. I'm going to, maybe I'll do some stamps on here. And I hope these stamp pads are still wet. I may do that. That. So I'm just going through, just adding. That particular stamp may be a theme throughout all the pages. What else can I do here? Let's see. I do kind of like this one, so I'm gonna try that. Let's see, then I think I'm going to, done some crayons. You know, I might decide to, maybe I'll outline some things. Here's markers that I can use. You could come in with watercolors, wet media, but just keep in mind that when you do that, this is thin paper and it may ripple. So you may want to, you may not want to. When I'm using, this right here, I'm going to use a glue stick, so it's not quite as wet and gooey as Elmer's glue. So instead of using a liquid glue, I'm going to use a glue stick that's going to help a little bit. I think I'll just do it right here. And like I said, right now this doesn't make sense because you're just adding. Yeah, I may put it over here. Put lots of the glue stick down. Usually with this thin paper, I could also use tracing paper or tissue paper, but with a thin paper you can kind of see how whatever you put underneath it, it'll show through. So that makes fun layering techniques. I'm going to keep working on all my pages. I want you to keep working on your pages. Look around the house, find what you can, and start pulling these together, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how to stitch everything. Okay, on this junk mail envelope book, I didn't finish all my pages. This is something you can keep working on. Once again, it's just a fun spare time doodles. You can doodle all over these envelopes. But I did, on some of them, I did that. I put the small envelope in the center so that I could make sure all of it was secured with my stitching. And then I'll just come in later. Oh, that's upside down though. I need to switch that around. Anyway, what you can do is clip it to where they're folded all together. You can come in and trim edges if you want. But the main thing you're going to do now is to take a pencil or a pen. Fine, I'll just use a marker. And I'm going to say you don't have to measure, but just maybe halfway. Make a mark halfway, then another mark, and another mark. Those are pretty evenly spaced, even though I didn't measure them evenly spaced here, 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 and here, and you've got 3 marks. Those are going to be your entry points on stitching. I went ahead and took the thread and I used some wax and tried to wax it, and once again, it's easy. It's take a candle. This is some wax, and I just run it through there, and it helps it go through the paper easier. So what you're going to do, this is a pamphlet stitch, and it's called a 3-hole pamphlet stitch, and it's right there on that crease. So you're going to press through. What I do is I like to make my holes ahead of time, and if your needle can make the hole, or you can use a stick pin that you have on a bulletin board, just anything that will come in here and make that hole. You see where I'm coming through? I'm trying to come through the center here. Missed that one a little bit. Okay, so if you want your tail, the end of the string, to be on the outside, that's how you start. Let's do it that way. I'm going to start right there at that hole. I'm going to go in, pull it through, and leave about that much. You want to make sure you can tie this off at the very end. So don't take it all the way to the tiny end. Just make sure you've got a couple 3 inches there. Then you see how it's coming through here? I'm going to go to this next hole right there. Pull that through. When you double thread it, it makes it a little harder to. Okay, so there's that. Flip it over. Then I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to bypass the center one, and I'm going to go all the way to that next hole. Okay. Now I'm on the inside. I'm going to come back to the hole that I entered, and that's how I'll go back out. So you see what I did? And I'm going to make sure that these threads are on either side of that long thread. So you just kind of tighten that. I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to do a square knot. If you wanted to get really decorative, you could have a thicker thread. You can use a thicker thread with this, and you could come in and do beads along the edge. Let's see, now I've got it. That's cut. I'll trim it. I can take these little clips off. And now I've got my pages. My pages are hooked together. A simple, easy way. And then on mine, obviously it's not finished. I didn't do all the pages and getting stuff on there, but I can go in now and do some things, and I have myself a book. Make sure that you have fun with this. That's the only thing I can say. It's very simple. Here are some old envelopes that I had. I think they came with a set of something. Nothing fits them. I think I'm going to cut those up. And I'm going to make, they don't have all the printing on them, but I'm going to make those into a little book. These make wonderful little journals. They make wonderful gifts. So have fun. What I'm going to show you next is a simple technique of trace printing. I love the chickpea puffs. I love this brand, and I like to eat them, as well as when I'm finished, I'll cut up the container, the bag. It's going to be kind of bright with these lights, but I turn it over, and it's got a nice thick surface that will hold paint. And what I like to do is I'll show you exactly what I'm going to do. I can use an oil paint with cold wax mixture. I'm going to cut this into pieces, And I'll do one with oil paint and cold wax. I'll do another one with maybe acrylic paint with a little medium mixed with it. And I'll show you what I'm using when I do that. And then you flip it over on a piece of paper. Maybe you're making a card. Maybe you're making a drawing of some sort. And you can draw onto the back side of this with the ink or the paint on this side. You can draw on this side and it will trace that onto the paper. But the interesting part is that you aren't real tight with your drawing because you can't really see exactly what you're doing. I mean, you can kind of draw on this, but you're not doing a real tight drawing, you know, like we might with shading and that sort of thing. It becomes a very loose line drawing, kind of a contour drawing, and that's something that I really like. So I'm going to cut this up. What I do when I make these, you can tell I've used this one a lot. Got lots of buildup on it of the black ink or the black paint. But what I do is, to keep it from rolling with the paint on it, I'll take pieces of cardboard and just tape it to the edges. That way, or here's one that I did this way, and that way I can pick it up and it makes it a lot easier to move around, flip over to do my drawing. So I'm going to try my first example with oil paint. So I have just a tube of oil paint. This is ivory black. It could be any color. And I have a little bit of the Gamblin Gallica gel. That is just like a medium for oil paint that helps it to flow a little smoother. So I put just a dab right here, if you can see that right there. And then I also have some cold wax that I can mix with this. What I'm going to do is start with the gel, and I could just do it with the straight oil paint, but I just thought let's try it with this, something to make it go a little smoother. And when you get your the chip, the inside of the chip container or bag, you need to wipe it off so it's not all oily. What I'm going to do is I could either take a bowl scraper and put it on here, like that. Or I could spread it with the bowl scraper, or I could take a brayer. And this is just something you can get in the art store. It's the way you do printmaking, but it helps get a nice even layer on here. And you don't want this to be super thick. So I'm going to roll it out all over this one. Because it's oil paint, it's not going to dry real quickly. It'll stay wet for quite a while. Okay, get that nice and smoothed out on here. Then what I'm going to do is set that aside, put this aside. I just took a piece of paper. I'm just doing samples for you. I'm not really making a project, but I just put some acrylic paint, any kind of tempera, acrylic, whatever you have. I went ahead and just made marks with this and smeared some of it on. What I'm going to do is lay that down, and then I'm going to lay this on top. I hope I didn't get that too thick. Let it drop on top. I'm going to take a pencil and just randomly, maybe I'll just even do these shapes. I'm not pressing hard, I'm just random. And this will be kind of like an abstract design. If you were doing an actual picture, something you have drawn, you could lay that on top and you could trace over things. Okay, so I didn't put my hands on it. I didn't do anything. Let's see what happens. Okay, pull that off. And this is the kind of line I'm talking about that's really cool. It's just like, it's kind of an erratic textural line, and I love it. So here is something you can do with that, with the chip bag. That's with oil paint. Now let's try something with the acrylic and some kind of extender with the acrylic to see if we can do it with that one. So next I want to try using acrylic on this. I got a smaller piece. This one is a bit wrinkled, but I think we can still use it. And I'm going to draw some designs on another piece of paper where I just put a thin layer of acrylic on it. I'm going to try open acrylics, and if you've ever used this, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's acrylic paint. You get it at the art store, but it's called open because it's workable longer. It stays wet longer. Now, not quite as much as an oil paint, but it still allows you some work time. So it's a real good product. If you don't have that, but you have lots of acrylic paint, you can also purchase a retarder. And you add a little bit of that. It's an additive to increase the working time of acrylic paint. So those are two products. I'm going to go ahead. In fact, I don't even think I need the palette here. I think I can put it just directly on here. And I'm going to use my brayer to get it nice and thin. I'm getting it on my table there. Another thing is these things are so durable. I mean, I've used it for, I can't tell you how many times I've used these, and I will use them sometimes on paintings that have dried, and I want to get some line action going in there. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this, the same thing. I'm just going to lay it down, just carefully let it fall, and then I'm going to take and I'm going to do something different. I'm going to see what happens if I go with my finger like that. Maybe I will do pencil. Drawing some trees, clouds. And right now, I don't have the paper on top to see where I'm drawing. So that makes it kind of exciting. It's a good printmaking process. And now when I pick this up, that was my finger that went across it. Here were some of the lines I made. That was where my finger went across it. But I just find it fascinating that you can get all these textures. These aren't planned drawings. When you do this, if you want to do this, make sure, if you have something planned, if you have a design, I could come in and, well, let's see. I'm going to lay it on top of here again. If I did just a real simple vase with flowers that I've drawn, it's kind of cool. You can kind of see that, and it just has a real, almost a primitive, childlike quality to it. So those are the two things I'm going to use. I think that I would stick with either the acrylic with some opening, something in there that extends the drawing time with either the open acrylic or with using oil paint. Once these are dry, then I can cut them up and use them for other things and have fun doing this. Well, we're at the end of our video, and we've covered making handmade papers and how to display them or how to use them. And we've also covered making handmade books out of junk mail envelopes. And then we also touched on how to do trace printing using the inside of chip bags. I hope you had fun, and I encourage you to look at things around you and practice artistic recycling.